Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode number 461 of For Immediate Release. I'm Shel Holtz.
And I'm Neville Hobson. This month marks 20 years since the first video was uploaded to YouTube, a 19-second clip that launched a global platform now at the center of digital media. As the platform reflects on its past, it's also looking sharply ahead, and what lies on the horizon is a bold AI-powered future highlighted in two reports published in the past week. According to YouTube's leadership, we're 5 years away from a world where every video uploaded to the platform could be automatically dubbed into every spoken language. More than that, the dubbed voice will sound like the original speaker, with AI-generated lip movements tailored to match the target language. It's a vision of seamless global accessibility, where creators can invest once and reach audiences everywhere. This isn't speculative. YouTube was already piloting dubbing tech with hundreds of thousands of creators and experimenting with voice cloning and lip reanimation. But with that ambition comes a fair amount of controversy. Underpinning these features is Google's Gemini AI model, trained on an ocean of YouTube videos, many from creators who weren't aware their content was being used this way. Some have pushed back, arguing that a license granted under YouTube's terms of service doesn't equate to informed consent for AI training. At the same time, YouTube's 2025 Trends Report highlights the rise of virtual influencers, synthetic personas who are building large audiences and changing what authentic content looks like. For a growing number of viewers, it doesn't seem to matter whether the face on screen is real, generated, or somewhere in between. What emerges is a picture of a platform trying to empower creators with powerful tools while quietly shifting the ground beneath their feet, culturally, ethically, and economically. On one hand, a report by Bloomberg paints a picture of YouTube as a tech powerhouse using AI to expand creative reach, drive viewership, and reshape media, but not without controversy over how training data is sourced, especially from creators unaware their content fuels these advancements. On the other hand, social media today's take focuses more on the cultural shift. AI-generated influencers, fan-created content, and multi-format storytelling are changing the rules of what audiences find compelling and raising questions about the very definition of authentic content. Both views converge on the same point. AI is here to stay, and whether you're excited or concerned, it's reshaping the creator economy from top to bottom. So is this YouTube fulfilling its mission to democratize creativity through technology? Or is it becoming a platform where the line between creator and content becomes so blurred that the original human touch gets lost? We should unpack this, Shel. There's quite a bit here to talk about, isn't there?
There is, and it seems to me a relatively natural evolution for YouTube. As long as creators are able to upload what they want, I think you will find plenty of authentic content. There's going to be no shortage of people who want to talk into a camera and share that, people who have ideas for themes that they think people would be interested in. I love hearkening back to a story I read about a physics grad student who started a YouTube series called Physics for Girls, and it was aimed at the K through 12 cohort of students and trying to get them interested in the STEM sciences. And it became very popular. And she was making, I think I read $1 million a year in advertising revenue. I don't think that'll stop. I think people will be able to continue to do that, which is in a platform where there's no limits, there's no constraints, how many gigabytes of video data can be uploaded. They just keep expanding their data center capacity, that there's room for all of this other stuff, including the AI generated content. And as long as it's entertaining or informative, if it serves a purpose, people will watch it. And that's the thing. If it's crap, people aren't going to watch it. It's not going to get recommended. It won't find its way into the algorithm, and people will stop spending time creating it if it doesn't produce the kind of results that they're looking for. But we've already seen that virtual influencers work on both sides of the equation. You can tailor them to be exactly what you know your audience is looking for. So it's great for the consumer. And in terms of the brand or the advertiser, you don't have these loose cannon celebrities that you're using, or somebody who's just a professional influencer who goes off the rails, you're in complete control. It's not my favorite concept, but I don't see any way to slow it down. And I think the people behind them are going to continue to find ways to make them resonate with the people that they're aiming them at. And in terms of the training of AI models on all of this, right now you have an administration in Washington, D.C. that is agreeable to the approach that the AI companies, OpenAI and Google, Anthropic and the like, want the government to take, which is to just put an end to this whole intellectual property thing and say AI can train on anything it wants to. So I think that's probably coming. God knows Elon Musk is training Grok on all of the content that is shared on X. And if you have an account there, that's your implicit permission to let him do that. It's one of the reasons that he went ahead and bought X in the first place, was knowing that he had access to that treasure trove of data. So I don't see that slowing down either. And I don't see the fact that people are unhappy that their content is being used for training being an impediment to having that content used as training. It's going to continue to happen.
Yeah, that's part of what worries me a lot about this, I must admit. If I taking the Bloomberg report, which is this idea of auto dubbing videos into every spoken language. We've talked about this before, not what YouTube's doing, but the notion of the example you often give, the CEO of a company giving an all-employee address, and he's an American or a native English speaker. And yet there's a version in 23 other languages like Urdu or Hindi or Spanish even. You then talk about Mongolian, perhaps if they have offices in Ulaanbaatar or something. That shows him fluent in talking in all of those languages, which is, I've always believed, and I still do, that's misleading unless you are very transparent, which in fact adds to your burden of engaging with employees. If you've got to explain every time, he's not fluent, and this is not really him speaking Hindi. It's an AI has done it, or however you might frame it. So that's not going to stop, though. The easier it gets, look at what YouTube is doing. So we're going to see this. And I think at your point, I agree with as well, that most people won't really care about this, probably. I count myself as a creator in terms of the very tiny bits of content I put up on my YouTube channel, which isn't a lot. It's not a regular cadence now and again. And if I found versions in a native language from Bolivia, for instance, would I care? Only in the sense of, is it reflecting exactly what I said in English? And you have to assume that it's going to be doing that. But that's not, to me, the point, really. They've gone ahead and done it without permission. There will be people who don't want this to happen to their content. But if Google's got T's and C's saying they can do this, if you don't like it, you're going to have to stop using YouTube. And that's the reality of life, I think. But there are a couple of things, though. I think Google wants creators to use its AI, i.e. Gemini, to create, edit, market, and analyze the content that they create. And that's, you may not want to use Gemini. You've got the training element that Google is assuming they're okay to use your content to do, things like that. It aligns with their terms of service, they say, but trust isn't in that equation as far as critics are concerned. The voice cloning and lip reanimation, the technology is amazing, I have to say. And according to Bloomberg, YouTube's already testing multilingual dubbing in 8 languages with plans to expand that. So yeah, there's hundreds to use. Voice cloning and lip syncing to mimic native language speech are in pilot phases. So all this is coming without doubt. So I think it is interesting. There's some downsides on all of that, according to Bloomberg. Dubbing will reduce CPMs when moving from English to other languages. You've got that to take into account too. But expanding reach to new language audiences may ultimately increase total revenue if it's a monetization thing you're looking at. So YouTube says they think quality content, to your point, will still rise above the growing flood of AI-generated deepfake material. I guess that's part of what we call AI slop these days, right? So there's that, which of course leads you straight into the other bit about virtual influencers and personas who just a casual look. And I was doing this morning, my time, before we were recording this, coming across examples of what people are writing about and publishing with photos and videos of people that you get it in the highest resolution you want. And I swear you cannot tell if it's real or not, if it's a real human being or an AI-generated video. Will that matter at the end of the day? I think it probably comes down to, do you feel hoodwinked when you find out it's an AI when you thought it was a person? And there's a few surveys out recently, and this is a tangential connection to this topic, but of people who are building relationships with AIs. They're getting intimate with them. I don't mean the obviously meaning of what we might think intimate means, but developing emotional bonds with an AI-generated persona. And there's great risk, I think, there of misuse of this technology without going down the rabbit hole or even the idea of it's all a conspiracy and they're out to steal our data and confuse us. No, it's not that. But there's great risk, I think, of opacity. Not forget about transparency. This is completely the opposite of that. And it's got issues, in my view, that we ought to try and be clearer than just give the likes of Google and others literally carte blanche to do what the hell they want without any regulation, which unfortunately, that seems to be aligned with Mr. Trump and his gang in Washington as to what they don't care about any of this stuff at all. In which case, tech companies, if you listen to some of the strong critics, are rubbing their hands with glee at what they're going to be able to do now without any oversight. And therein is the issue. But I'm not saying that's something we should therefore get out our pitchforks and shovels and march on Washington. But it's a concern, right? This is a major development. The virtual influencers, I think, is an exciting idea, but the risks of misuse are huge in my view. So I just having the yes but moment here, basically. And I'm normally I don't normally do this, Shell. I'm normally embracing all this stuff straight away, but there's big alarm bells ringing in my mind about some of the stuff that's happening.
I think a lot of it is going to be contingent upon what we become accustomed to.
Yeah.
As you become accustomed to things, they just become normalized and you don't give them a second thought. There was a TV commercial. I'm going to have to see if I can find it. They must have it on YouTube, even though this had to be 20, maybe 25 years ago. I believe it was an IBM commercial. It was a great commercial, by the way. This is why I remember it so many years later. It was either black and white or toned. It was in a dusty old diner out in the middle of nowhere, and there's a waitress behind the counter, and there's nobody there. One guy wanders in and sits down, and I don't remember what he asks for, but they don't have it. They don't have this. They don't have that. And then he sees the TV. He says, "What do you have on TV?" And she says, "Every movie and television show ever made in any language you want to hear it in." And they're talking about the future of technology, right? If you get to a point where anything you want to see is available in your language, then does it continue to be an ethical question when you see your CEO who doesn't speak your language speaking to you in your language? Or is this just something that we all accept that the technology does for everything now? And it doesn't matter whether he speaks your language or not. He can because of the technology. Now, I'm not saying that's something that we should be promoting as an approach to take today from an ethics standpoint. I think you do need to let people know. We think it's going to be a lot easier and more meaningful for you to hear the CEO speak in your native language. He doesn't speak it. This was AI assisting with this. But in 5 years, when everything is handled that way, will it even matter? I suspect that it won't. I suspect it won't matter whether somebody speaks that language when you know that any media you consume can be consumed in your native language, thanks to the technology that we all take for granted at that point.
That's a sound assessment, and you may well be right. I suspect that much of what you said will likely come to pass. I just think that there's concerns we ought to be paying more attention to than we seem to be, it seems to be. For instance, one big thing to me is, I guess it's related to the ethical debate, but what does real mean anymore in this? What does authenticity mean now? It doesn't mean what it meant yesterday. If you've got virtual influencers creating videos, you don't know that that's not a real person. Things like that.
Let's keep in mind that I was sold sugar frosted flakes by Tony the Tiger, who is not a real person or even a real tiger.
But they weren't pretending it was or making you assume that it probably was. That's a wholly different thing.
The modern equivalent. And
of Tony the Tiger.
Yeah, and the virtual influencers I've seen so far are obvious. I have not seen one that they have worked really hard to convince you that this is anything but a virtual influencer. And on Instagram, at least, most of them, I see the disclosure that they are. I just don't think people care.
No.
If they're getting good information, if they're being entertained, are you not entertained? If you are, you'll continue to watch. And if somebody says, that's AI, your answer is going to be, okay, so?
I get that. But I think we have a responsibility to point out certain things, whether people care or not. That's part of
Oh,
our
without question.
responsibility as communicate. Yeah. So,
Yes.
so hence my point about what does real mean? How do we get to finding real now? And I think the kind of big worry waiting in the wings is the fakery that we see everywhere. It's getting even easier to do this kind of thing. Deep fakes, whatever they're now called, that's been off the radar for a bit now, but suddenly you'll see something. And for what, I mean, I haven't seen anything myself, but I did read this morning that already there's videos around of Pope Francis who died on Monday, that he's not actually, according to these videos. He's out there speaking and doing all these events and so forth. That will confuse some people. This is, I think, the grave risk of not the technology, because it's what people will do with it. And I'm not suggesting for a second that because of that, therefore, we shouldn't do X and Y and so forth. Not at all. But we need to address these concerns, and indeed the unspoken concerns, before they become a problem, or at least make people aware. And that is a lot to do with the awareness that we're already seeing from governments everywhere. Like here in the UK, for instance, I see government ads across every social network now and again about checking the authenticity of things and people and products that people are pitching and so forth. And that will ramp up, no doubt, in which case opportunity for communicators then for that kind of education. So it perhaps will come down to the ethical debate on training, on consent, on people's rights, intellectual property, whatever governments in Washington, D.C. The situation with Trump and his sycophants, as I call them, really, is more than a blip. It's made a huge change around the world that no one could have predicted. Whatever you think about Trump, you've got to give it to him in one sense. A huge change on almost every country around the world. So I see here things that people are discussing now, we're going to do X, would never have dreamt that these politicians would be suggesting that if Trump was not on the scene. So that is a big impact in all of this. And it's hard to predict what effect that's going to have on something like this. But I think the concerns of people about training, for example, using their content without permission, human beings, again, this is a related thing to what other conversations are worried about being replaced by the AIs, things like that. That's not a separate or suddenly new thing, but it just reinforces, in my view, certainly, that we need to address all of these things. We need to show that we have people's backs in their concerns about this, and we're going to help understand it if we can. That's our job as communicators, it seems to me.
Yes, in addition to creating some of this content.
Yeah, oh, indeed. Yeah. So big
That'll be
topic.
and that'll be a 30 for this episode of For Immediate Release.